You're listening to the Devil Dog Talk Show.
This show contains explicit material and is recommended for ages 18 and older for mature audiences only. But hey, it's the internet.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Devil Dog Talk Show. Today we have Christopher CJ Allen, and we're going to be talking about suicide prevention, our favorite topic. Now, Christopher and I met out on LinkedIn, and I'm going to give a shout out to LinkedIn because we're working to get a hold of their CEO and see what we can do with them too. And so today we're going to be kind of running down exactly what the resources are, exactly what Chris can offer, how to prevent suicide, and more so, when we started this campaign to end veteran suicide, our goals are to literally end veteran suicide. So we're going to turn it over to Chris. Welcome, Chris. Thank you for showing up today.
All right, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. When I found the resources that you have able to present to our audience today, it hit me absolutely profoundly. So much so that I'm going to avoid vulgarities and curse words because I want even kids to be playing this on YouTube. I want everybody to hear it. I want the school teachers to play it. I want people to put it on their projectors. I want people to, do they even have projectors anymore? Whatever they watch in school. Okay.
Smart boards, yeah.
Yeah, smart boards. There you go. Look at that. See, Mr. Resourceful. He actually knows what they got. I don't. So today I really want to dive deep into yourself a bit. Of course, we're going to introduce you to the audience, our global audience. We got some really great friends out in Ireland and Japan that really just sent us amazing letters the other day. And I'm really excited to connect them with you and what you can do for our community, not just the veteran community, because suicide is prevalent in the United States and globally more than ever. It's a very, very, very serious subject. However, we can discuss it in a way where it doesn't hurt so bad. And we find the solutions exactly like what Chris is going to be talking about.
Right.
So Chris, what was how do we start this conversation? What was your beginnings to the military, I should say?
So, I mean, I'll give you the very Reader's Digest version because I've served over 26 years. I just retired in April of 25, so I'm newly retired service member. But I started all the way back in 1988, which, half the audience, was born, after that. At any rate, so I started off in the Navy. I did 6 years in the Navy, was stationed eventually in Charleston, South Carolina, where I met my wife and we started our family. After 6 years in the Navy, they were closing the base in Charleston. So I got out and I was out of the service for 10 years. Really didn't think I'd ever go back in the service. And then 9/11 happened. And then the bug bit me to come back in the service. Wasn't exactly sure what that was going to look like. I found the South Carolina National Guard, joined the Army, South Carolina National Guard back in 2006. Did almost 20 years with them and then retired. And while I was with the Army National Guard, is really whenever I started my resiliency and suicide prevention part of my life. We deployed to Iraq in 2011, came back in 2012. And whenever I came back from that deployment, we did not lose anybody to combat, thank goodness. But, we had some significant issues, mental health issues, really, being separated from your family, being, segmented from the world, in the middle of the desert, does things to your psyche, right? So whenever I came back, I was seeing in myself and in our unit just a lot of stressors that were happening, reintegrating back into family life, back into civilian life, and all those things. And so, and that was in 2012. And so I kind of just lived that life and observed those things, for about a year. And then I went into a new unit. And whenever I went into that new unit, the current master resiliency trainer was leaving that unit. And anybody in the military will understand what happened next. I literally just happened to be in the room when that person turned in their notebook of all their master resiliency trainer stuff to the operations sergeant. And literally the operations sergeant took the folder from the binder from him and handed it to me because I was in the room and said, "You are now the master resiliency trainer." So, didn't have to have any prior experience, didn't ask. I mean, I didn't mind. Obviously, in the military, you do what you're told to do, all of the extra duties. So went to training, learned how to be a master resiliency trainer. So that was in 2012, 13 timeframe. And that was my first formal sit down, and this is what resiliency is, and this is why we do it. I mean, obviously I was part of, I listened to the annual briefs that we had that talked about resiliency and talked about suicide prevention, but it never really sat down. So I went through that training, and then became one of the state trainers for resiliency because I like to volunteer for stuff, I guess. So I did that for several years, did that for about 4 years. And then at the time, the suicide prevention program manager for the South Carolina Army National Guard was moving on to a different job. And they called me up and it's like, would you want to do this?
Mm-hmm.
Now, up to this point, again, never had any professional suicide prevention training. And so I didn't know. I was a federal technician at the time. So I was doing line of duty injury cases for the South Carolina Army National Guard. This was a similar technician job, same rank, all that kind of good stuff. So I talked to my wife, I talked to my boss, I talked to my unit, and, everybody seemed like it was okay. So I went ahead and made the transfer over to suicide prevention. That was in 2016. And again, never had any formal suicide prevention training, but, I went to go get applied suicide intervention skills training, which is training by Living Works, was trained in the Army's ACE program, Ask Care Escort. So then that started my, career in suicide prevention. And then that, morphed into, working with other agencies outside of the government, working with Living Works, working with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, working with Patrol Base, Abate. I'll send you all these links, all that kind of good stuff. And so, Patrol Base, Abate, just so many, we talk about resources, there's millions of veterans out in the community. In South Carolina, we have about 500,000 veterans. Worldwide, obviously, we have tens of millions of veterans. And when we talk about suicide prevention and resiliency, there's not one program that's going to fit all, millions of veterans that we have out there.
Mm-hmm.
We have some veterans that only want to talk to a chaplain, or only want to talk to a doctor, or only want to talk to a peer support specialist. And all of those three that I just mentioned are great, but one size does not fit all. And so what I tell people all the time is find what works for you. If you're talking to a doctor and that doctor isn't connecting with you, you're not connecting with them, find a different doctor. If you have a spiritual leader that you've been working with and that's not working, find a different spirit. You are in charge of your own destiny and your own treatment, if you want to call it that. So yeah, that's, I don't know what the next thing we're going to talk about, but that's really the essence of my career, starting back in 1988, going into resiliency and suicide prevention, and then becoming an advocate, for the veteran community to find. We're doing a lot. We're doing a lot more than we were doing in 1988 whenever I came in, but we need to do more. That's the honest truth.
I absolutely agree with you. It's so much so that I invited you on because there's so much more that we could be doing together. Not just me and you, but us as the community. I've been through it, right? I think a lot of veterans and our listeners definitely know.
Right.
When you are isolated and you don't know which way to go, you said it perfectly. You are in charge of your destiny. the disconnect with what my personal experiences are and resources and services are seemingly simple solution, right? There's this resistance to treatment. There's this barriers
Right.
to
Right.
communicate. And that's coming from our side of the house, the veteran seeking the help or the individual seeking the help. Now, that's what I've really, really loved how you brought that up, right? Here's your history. Here's who you are. This is the reasons why. And yes, veterans want chaplains, they want doctors, they want peer support. They want it all because exactly what you said. It doesn't, one is not going to work for everyone, right? This
Right.
is that skin in a cat type of a situation. There's a million ways, right? I
Yep.
love the way that you brought that up because it gives us the opportunity to elaborate on what modalities are the best methods of reaching out.
So that's the question, right? I mean, inside our office, out in the community, how do you reach millions of people? And let me back up a little bit, and the reason why that is so important. So, in America, we lose about 45 to 50,000 people to suicide every year. Worldwide, we lose about 1 million. You talk about veterans being all over the world. So all over the world, we lose about 1 million humans every year to suicide. In America, of those 45 to 50,000, 6 to 7,000 of those, unfortunately, for the last 2 decades, have been about 6 to 7,000 veterans. So let's look
Yeah.
at that for a second. Veterans make up less than 1% of the population, but yet we make a significant portion of those that die by suicide. So that's what gives fire to why it's important to reach out to veterans. I'm glad you mentioned in the beginning, schools, other areas. What I say and what anybody says in suicide prevention can absolutely be applied to other communities that are fighting the same problem.
Mhm.
But I focus my efforts on veterans not dying by suicide. So how do we reach them? What we're doing right now, the internet is a great way. You mentioned LinkedIn. I don't know how many, we have Facebook, we have all the things, right? Snapchat, we have Instagram. A lot of times, though, it's word of mouth, and that's really difficult, right? How do you reach 15 million or more people, word of mouth? We have the VFWs of the world, we have the American Legions of the world, we have the coffee shops of the world. One avenue that I just found recently was the Realms of Asgard, which is an online community that's based in suicide prevention, mental health, and then especially for veterans.
Oh,
So,
wow.
if you're online, playing, in that community, the Realms of Asgard, online, their folks are trained in suicide prevention. So, you talked about not wanting to talk to folks.
Mhm.
Not wanting to go and sit down, with the doctor or somebody else. Well, here you can be in a safe environment, your own home, doing something that you are doing to cope, with life, to maybe take a break from life, playing, on the video game. And then you can reach out for help at the same time. And over the last year, they've documented 5 lives that they've saved. And what I told them is those 5 lives, those are the ones that you knew that you saved. You cannot calculate maybe how many hundreds of people you saved that just didn't come forward and tell you that what you were
Yes.
doing, saves people.
Exactly.
So,
Dude.
internet, um, going and talking, what I do a lot of times is just go and just talk to folks. Whoever, wants to talk about suicide prevention, I go in, whether it's a school or a veteran community. Um, Another great organization is American Association for Suicidology. So that's a lot more clinical. So if you're a
Mhm.
clinician and you really want to find out best practices, that's a good organization to go to. So it really, again, it kind of goes back to the beginning of what we were saying. It goes to, who are you trying to reach? If you're trying to reach those that are internet savvy, then obviously you blast it over the internet. But if you want just a low tech human approach, you really have to get in front of people, right? That's how, whether it's one person or 100 people or 1,000 people. Sometimes you just have to get out and talk to people. I know that's not a quick approach, but it works. So many different
It
ways to reach
profoundly
out to
works.
folks.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's one of those things that I've taken a lot of accounting of my efforts and abilities these past few weeks, right? And in all honesty, from my own experience, my truth, I have reached out in every and single way that one could fathom. And when you said it, that it's still your destiny, it is still on you, my dude, right? I was
Right.
like, listen, I love that you said it because there's this always this devil's advocate on my shoulder that's just like, well, just give up, just give up, just quit,
Right.
right?
Right.
And then there's this angel in my ear going, but then you meet people like Chris, and then you do a show, and then I'm like, okay, hold
Right.
on. So getting in front of people, right? I don't have a problem with it. It's getting in front of the right people is what I've
Right.
noticed is the trick. Because I've literally reached out to Frank P. Pearson, the gentleman here, director in San Diego, Jim Desmond's office, Daryl Issa's office, Brian Jones, the senator, Carl DeMaio, you name it, just to explain what I've experienced in the past year and a half. I'm sorry, past 15 years plus most recently the year and a half that I've kept an investigative journal's eye on
Right.
everything that I've experienced. Because when I meet people like you, I go, hey, how is it come that the SPT team, the literal suicide prevention team, and here in San Diego, couldn't connect me with anything like a person like you? They sent
Right.
me a letter, I tried all the links, I did all the phone numbers, and I downloaded the virtual hope box. Okay. And I'm all about that, right? But you said
Right.
it the
Right. Right.
best. When we're trying to reach everybody, millions and millions of people that are different, and our outreach systems are archaic or very limited or practiced solely for liability issues,
Right.
I discovered that there's these metrics that the VA uses specifically. It's something like a REACH program,
Right.
REACH. It's a testing program to see whether or not somebody's suicidal enough in order to do something. And
Right.
I found it ridiculously interesting that the statistics on that, it only cues 0.01% of the people that are fed into the system. So now I'm here with you. You
Right.
studied the suicidology, right? I know it got me good. And
Yeah.
the numbers is 6,000 to 7,000. You know it more intimate than I do. But being of veteran men, right? I found that profoundly revealing, right? We have a system and it's being utilized. I don't know why it's being utilized because if the ratio of effect is 0.01 and the numbers that we are seeing are increasing. I'm not
Right.
saying maybe we're using the wrong algorithm. I'm telling the world, dudes, we're using the wrong algorithm. We're
Right.
missing whole communities every year, 6,500 people. I know towns that have less than that people. Okay.
Right.
What are we doing? Well, this is the answer. The solution is very simple. We have to communicate to everybody at the same time, all the time, every day. And that's where it gets discouraging being the person going through that, right? Oh, like, I barely even wanted to talk to these people. Now they're telling me it's 10%, it's 0%, it's you got to figure it out. It's, oh my God, I don't care. It's, yeah, hey, that's the way it is. That's the
Right.
world, right? But as a community, this is where I love these energies, this passion in you, this team effort to say, hey guys, Chris is here to help, man. Right? No matter how many times you've called the suicide crisis hotline, like myself, like 50 times in the last year. And even
Yep.
if you had a peer support group person, what's up, Todd? And even if you had to break up with you because they can't help me in my situation, that's what's up, Todd. Thank you for sharing it. And Todd was like, hey, dude, but they can see all your paperwork. I'm like, yeah, I know they see it, but they don't do anything about it. And I go, wow. And the rest of the year keeps going on. And I read about this poor child, and I'm going to say he is a child, a young man, 33. Are you kidding me? He kills
Right.
himself in the Audie Murphy place. And I'm like, dude, that just happened, didn't it not? Yeah. Well, what are we doing? What are we doing? Why aren't we having Chris and Doug Collins having a lot more conversations every day? Why aren't we having conversations with Donald J. Trump, the executive branch person that could literally put into scripture, not to be negative towards the Bible, but literally into scripture what we could be
Right.
doing? I guarantee
Right.
you have solutions. I know you have solutions.
Well, so yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the algorithm, and I'm not an algorithm genius or anything like that. But I'm going to tell the harsh truth, right? Is talking about suicide doesn't sell.
It does
It
not.
doesn't get, the hits, it doesn't get the likes, it doesn't get the algorithm gods coming together and blasting the message out. Other things do. If it doesn't monetize the system, it doesn't work in the algorithm. But here's what I tell people about return on investment, right? So when we spend money in suicide prevention and in suicide prevention training and talking about suicide prevention, it saves lives. And in every life that we save, if you want to put it, in the military, aspect, if somebody, in the military dies by suicide, they have to recruit a new person, train a new person, all of the things, and that costs money.
Mm-hmm.
So if we save lives, again, even in 2025, people, generally speaking, do not like talking about the topic of suicide. But if we do, then at the end of the day, we will save money. If you want to talk money, then you're going to save thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions and billions of dollars if we really, really start talking about suicide prevention. I mean, talking about it, all due respect, I'm a trainer, all due respect to awareness training that happens in the military. I'm glad we do it. But then what? Now you've talked about it and now you're aware. If I could go down the street, any street in America, and I could stop a random person and I could say, what are the signs and symptoms of suicide? And they're going to tell me withdrawing, giving away things, being depressed, not wanting to be engaged, going away from friends and family. I mean, they can list it. That's not the problem anymore. We're there, right? People are aware. Now, what's next?
Dude, you're speaking my love language in so many ways. I'm for real, for real. I read
Right.
these books, How to Say It Best, right? And they're great books. They guide, there's a relationship one, there's family ones. And
Yeah.
I'm of the brand of the idiots books as well, How to Do This If You're an Idiot book. I can't remember the whole title, but this
Right.
is stuff that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really so simple that it's kind of sad that we're overlooking it, right?
Right.
And I find this because of fear. I mean, you brought it up, and I really want to hit that topic. People don't want to talk about suicide, and I go, yeah, because
Yeah.
it's scary.
Yeah.
It's the scariest thing to find out that the worst thing you could be is with yourself in a room by yourself. And
Right.
I don't know people and on a normal basis. I've done this for 15 years now. I get to go in between my ears and play with it. And I do it in a way where I come up with these solutions and then I try to, I talked to Robert Bott here, the chief experience in San Diego. I talked to for like 80 emails, right? I talked to Daryl East's office. I send inquiries. I send OIG reports because I have a faith of exactly what you're saying. Dude, if we are allowing, and I don't mean allowing, I mean essentially forcing people into a solution that's permanent because of the economic philosophy is when a
Right.
dog is no longer of use, you put it down. My
Mhm.
question is, how much money does it actually cost to hook up people with Joey and Chris and all of our resources globally? Because here's my sweet spot, right? If we have relationships developing with these large CEOs in all these different regions and all these wonderful things, and I'm just a me, just regular old Joey, right? All I know how to do is connect people and say, hey guys, look, I thought about this problem. I know Chris has thought about this problem. I know you guys all thought about this problem. I know Doug probably gives some tears, at the end of the day. There's a few other people that, just are appearing in Congress recently. There's a lot of programs, special programs like the caregivers program, the PCFC. It's very difficult to get anything done, but it starts with the culture of the community. but we
Yes.
don't communicate about suicide, and we don't just say, oh, well, all they got to do is suck it up, they're a coward. I've seen a Medal of Honor recipient say that about people online, and I was flabbergasted by it. If you kill yourself regardless of the circumstances, you're the coward. So I asked, hey, what about the people positioning those people, those cowards that you claim, that are in a situation where they're so desperate and confused, they're medicated out of their skull, and the only thing they actually need is a little bit of empathy from the community, and you as a leader with that little shiny piece of metal on your chest has those words to say about it? Why aren't you calling up the people in charge of what we're doing? Why aren't you asking them to come to the table with Chris and Joey and saying, hey, what's the solution? I got them. They're there. We
Right.
got it written
Right.
down. This is real. This is real life.
You know, whenever I hear you, talk about the people who are saying negative things, what resonates in my mind is programming, right? So I will tell you, going back to 1988, whenever I came in. So let's look at who my trainers were whenever I went through basic training. So I came in 88. So those trainers came from Vietnam. Let's think about that for a second. So, a horrible time in U.S. history, especially when you look at service members and, not only how they were treated when they came home, but really how they were treated when they were, sent into this. So when they come back, they saw things a million times worse than I've ever seen. And now they're molding young minds. And so, what they say, what they do, and how they act in basic training resonates with that person and sticks with them their whole military career. So then you have, somebody, and I'm speaking to my generation. I'm 57 years old. I'm speaking to my generation. We typically tell people to suck it up and drive on because that's how we were trained by the generation that came before us. But at some point, you have to stop and break the cycle, right? And so we were indoctrinated one way, we were programmed one way. So we have to get to reprogramming not just the ones who are in now, that's some work, but then also reprogramming the veterans' brains of the ones that came, before us. And now, somehow, some way, we're going to need to reach the ones who are coming into the military now.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting good messages in the world we live in right now in 2025. So what those three things I'm talking about, how to talk to the people who are in now, the ones that are coming in, and the ones who've already left. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I know it's going to be a difficult task, but you're talking about the cost. How much does it cost to talk to somebody? $0. But before you can talk to them, you talked about veterans that are, disconnected and out there in the world and they're not reaching the right resources because they don't know about the resources.
Exactly.
Right. They don't know what they don't know what they don't know. So I'll mention this. So 988. If I say 988 to you, you know what 988 is.
Absolutely.
Do you know it's been out for 3 years?
No.
Right. So it came out 3 years ago, and it was in the process of coming out, at least a decade before that. So if I go down the street and I ask people the signs and symptoms of suicide, they'll rattle them off. Top 10. No problem. If I tell them what number do you call if somebody's in a mental health crisis or thinking about suicide, they might say what?
911.
They might say 911, and that's fine. But 911 is for physical injuries. We learned, so I was taught in school how to use 911. So if somebody's injured, science showed if you can get somebody to a treatment facility within an hour, they call it the magical or golden hour. That they have a greater chance of surviving whatever physical injury they have. 988 does the same thing for the person who's having thoughts of suicide. But we did not do the same marketing campaign with 988 like we did with 911. Right? We didn't.
Exactly.
It might be a little bit in schools, but in schools, whenever I went in, when we learned 911, they had the phone. I know they had a
The
phone that not quite that bad. I do remember what that is, but I mean, they would bring in, a desk phone with the numbers, and the kids would practice, dialing 911 and all that kind of good stuff. Unfortunately, I also practiced on the phone at home, and I actually got some attention on the family that we shouldn't have gotten. But the fact is, we're not doing the same level of training for 988. So that's just one resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it does cost money to do marketing campaigns. If your audience is to the veterans, it's cost a certain amount of money. If your audience is to the schools, it's a certain amount of money. It does cost money, but it's money. They are spending the money, but not at the same rate that we are on other stuff, right? And now, I don't want to mention the other stuff because they're good things to be marketing about, but we're not doing the same thing with suicide prevention, right? So
I agree with you so much on that. Like, I mean, in general, the human species is bad at communicating. I think the resources are there, right? But you see, this is the thing. Exactly what you're saying is, if we are unaware, we don't know what we don't know, then we
Right.
understand the part of the confusion, right?
Right.
That was one of the comments that the gentleman made on his audio that he posted. All right, the young man that just recently died last week. And he said this very word, "I'm confused," right?
Mhm.
I don't understand how this is that. And then he used a specific rating. They gave me a specific rating, and they said that, "Oh, because it doesn't actually affect me." And he went on saying how he's always confused, how he doesn't know what's going on, that he feels he's fallen apart. He has an autoimmune disease, right? All of these categoriological words that are significant to a medical practitioner, but to a Marine sergeant, I'm going to say, my brothers in Christ, no, that is not how you communicate how to operate. And this is where the managing of expectations between the community is, where our role is with ADAX Entertainment and the Devil Doc Talk Show and our fleet of shows that we're establishing, our series, our documentaries, our films, our outreach. The goal is to do exactly what you just said. It costs money,
Yep.
right? But we're clearly spending money with the wrong people. Now, if
Right.
we spend it with the right people, like yourself, myself, our team, the people that I know are dedicated to actually reducing suicide to the point where we don't have it. And people would say, "Oh, that's an outrageous goal. You're being delusional." I go, "Fine then. Get delusional. Get
Yes.
get absolutely enraged. You people who are in charge, lose your mind a bit, because clearly the mindset you have isn't worth a penny." And that is
Right.
the worst feeling on earth, as a man that has solutions and answers and has zero authority or power. When you feel that way, I now see why even guys that I know do it.
Right.
Right? We see
Right.
people in places of greatness in life, right? And celebrities that do things, and then finally something breaks, and they're about to pick up the next big thing, and then boom, they relapse because they
Yep.
don't understand the situation is what it is. It may feel fleeting, it may feel temporary, sure, but when you commit yourself to a permanent solution, whether it be a negative coping mechanism, whether it be refusing to communicate, whether it be any of these things, that is your destiny that you've chosen. That's one thing I'll agree with people. It is definitely your choice. But here's the thing
Right.
we can help each other with. Let's make the choice easier to reach out, to communicate, to establish rapport, to build up some bedside manner, because it's atrocious here in San
Yeah.
Diego, PA. It is disgusting, right? Now, here's the worst part is, like, dude, I
Right.
was a corpsman for so long. I know how to perform, right? That's, hey, welcome to the show, right? And
Right.
the reason why is because when you use the uniform, when you're in the uniform, when you put that thing on and you get to serve, the last thing you want to do is not serve. It's so much
Right.
important to our community, all of our civilians within the VA. And I love calling the VA out, because guess what? They make $451 billion in their budget and are falling flat on their face to prevent suicide, or even implement efficient and effective systems for understanding what the actual statistics are, right?
Right.
And if we were to look at it as a whole, as a nation, of course I agree with Washington Post. Yeah, we are wasting money. And yeah, you know what, veterans, you're the worst. Okay? what I can say though to that is then as a community, let's stand up and show them just how horrible we are. And guess what? When they look at it, they'll be like, well, you guys aren't actually that bad. Statistically, the fraud that they were trying to report on, it was 0.6% or point something lower than a fraction of a percent. And I go,
Right.
okay, so what did you recuperate from that Washington Post article? Oh, maybe 70 million in the past 6 years. Oh, okay. Hey guys, listen to this number. 451 billion. Okay, now listen to this. 19 to 20 billion on mental health alone. Hey, how about this one? Outreach and medical health records is another 20, 30 billion. Administrative just waste. Administrative just waste? Yes, Joey. Administrative waste close to 20 something billion a year within these facilities, these organizations. And the Washington Post wants to pretend like they have a journalistic integrity ounce left to survive their collapse of what they are. No, thank you. All right. Mr.
Right.
Martinez is standing up and saying, sirs, kind sirs, Mr. Chris and I, we're going ahead and leading this and this conversation. And if you don't want to close off your mind for a moment and learn something, then you need to get out of the room and let the gentleman work, right? Because right now we are at an inflection point where we're seeing people pivot into the reduction of benefits. All right, we see it all day, every day in the veteran community, but the civilian community is coming from it. Well, yeah, we're just wasting money. Joe had just said it. I'm like, yes, no, not we, them. The people that are in charge are wasting this money, and we know how to fix it. Where there's the committees boards, there's all these committees, there's all these boards, there's all these nonprofits, not-for-profits. There's so many resources, right? And even in the nonprofit space, like Wounded Warrior Project and the Big Six, they make hundreds of millions a year. But
Right.
they then leave scraps for the ones that are actually doing the work, the legwork, the grunts, the ones who actually, like me and you just found out and said straight up, hey, you got to go out there and shake hands and kiss babies. All right. That's the world, my friends.
That is.
And if you don't, then we continue to see the numbers that we do. So I got to ask you a couple more questions here,
Go ahead.
Chris, before we wrap
Go ahead.
it up. How do we stay in touch with you, and how do we do better as a community?
Well, me personally, I mean, I think I'm very easy to find. If you type in my full name, Christopher Jay Allen, and just do a simple Google search, you can usually get to me pretty good. My email address that I haven't changed and probably never will change is CJ Allen, ALLEN 123@gmail.com. I made it simple because I have to remember it too, right? So there's that. So that's a simple way to get a hold of me. But one thing that I know you're going to ask a couple of questions, but I do want to go back to the legislation portion of it and the representatives that we have. So, and I go to the advocacy days and I do the things and I go to DC, but I will tell you, it's the same thing that we've been talking about, right? Suicide prevention is not really a topic that they talk about a lot, right? There's so many other things that they deal with. I mean, we just went through a whole shutdown, for many different reasons we won't get into right now. But to make suicide prevention more of a forefront, we just need more advocates. We need more people that will literally send emails, make phone calls, do the things, right? Because the more people we get behind this, the more people we have talking. I mean, that's why we have what we have today. If we would not have the resources for suicide prevention today, if people didn't advocate for it, in the years before we got here. And it's not just on advocacy days. It's like, building a relationship. Now, I'm not saying you have to like the person who's representing your area, but wherever you live, you're represented by someone, whether you like them or not. So build a relationship with them. I'm not saying that you have to contribute to them or do anything for them, but they need to know who you are. My representatives in my area know who Chris Allen is. They know that Chris Allen's going to come to DC once a year because I talk to the staffers before I show up. I say, this is the day, I make appointments. It takes months to get an appointment, but I make the appointments. I, meet with the same staffers every year. We basically have the same conversation every year. They know Chris is going to come back year after year. And that's what, you were talking about, kissing babies and shaking hands. You have to, it's hard. I mean, it's one thing to try to dismiss an email or dismiss a phone call. It's harder, not impossible, but harder to dismiss somebody who's coming to your office to take 15 minutes out of your time to discuss suicide prevention, and particularly for veterans. We have you call 911, you call 988. I messed up myself. You call 988, you press 1. That gets you to the military veteran side of 988, that you will have people specifically trained in how to talk to veterans about suicide and how to prevent suicide. And, they can even connect you to local resources in your area. We talked about the big resources out there, but there are some resources that are just in San Diego, California, or in Columbia, South Carolina. They meet at Hardee's every second Tuesday of every month, and 5 guys show up and they're just talking.
Dude, I love
Those
that
are
you
the type
brought
of
that up.
resources that are not going to get any publicity. They're not going to get their own website. They're not going to get their own phone number, but you need to find the resources, again, that speak to you. And if it's 5 guys in a coffee shop talking, great. If it's 30 guys going into the middle of Montana to spend a week together hunting and fishing and talking, then do that. Whatever fits, use that. But you talk about legislation is not going to change if you don't build these relationships with your legislators, make your voice known. They need to know who you are, and then advocate for the funds that we need to do the campaigns, to do the training, to do the postvention and the true prevention, the primary prevention, along with the intervention that we are very versed in.
I love it, Chris. That is the best news that I've had on the show in such a long time, is a man like yourself with your passion, the energy, and the fortitude, the integrity to stand up and communicate, to go to those offices. I've been offered a lot of different things and opportunities, being who I am and what I do, right? And I would always tell everybody, dude, if you can, go out there and work whatever it is you can say or do, and try. If it's a limit where you're like, I've done everything, I'm giving up, whatever. That's what I mean to our listeners, to our family out here, to the loved ones that we've seen suffer, right? It doesn't stop with you once you're gone. All right. This is the thing that I really wanted to hit on, is for some odd reason, suicides come in multiples, right? The moment we get 1, we get 2 to 3, sometimes more than that. I've heard of units having up to 6 or 7 in like a month. I've heard of the sheriff's department here in LA, I think it was, they had like 6 suicides in a year. And I'm like, what are we doing? And if it's the same solutions that we're getting as veterans, I'm telling you, it's not enough. And you bring up 988, and I love 988 plus 1. Why? Because they do want to hear you. Now, that doesn't mean the solution's going to come out of that. However, if you provide yourself the opportunity to articulate repeatedly and often, even a man like me with trauma and brain injuries and half of a whatever ability, I don't know what it's called, I call it handy capable. And what we do with that is we try our best. But here's what I want people to do now. It's not try. All right. John Andrejcik's wife, she just wrote a book. I'm really hoping to get a hold of them. They really support the cause with the veteran community. And when she wrote that book and I read it, I was like, well, I read the cover, I should say. The don't try, do. Okay. Right. And that really hit me hard, is to do it. And me and my family were just talking about this last night. If there is a problem that you see in your own household and you're avoiding confrontation because of either you might come off as a prick, or you may be mean, or evil, or whatever the words are, then what can we do to circumvent that urge to be quiet, to not communicate? Well, it's me, Chris, having these conversations. It's the resources that we discussed and the ones that we are going to connect our listeners to on the bio and everything that we have, because the goal is to make you all realize that, yes, this is your destiny. And I wish to God, and I pray every morning and day, that even the ones that we feel are holding us back as a community, I want them in on it too. In fact,
Right.
I want them in on it so much more, because honestly, Chris, you know this. If we were to sit down with Donald Trump and say, "Sir, this is exactly the pitfalls. These are your pain points. This is the leveraging, and this is what it will be, and this is what the possibilities are and potentials," we wouldn't have to waste another year of going to and from DC. We wouldn't have to waste hundreds of billions of dollars a year and have this internal struggle between communities. When I see the community say veterans get everything handed to them, I see the propaganda, okay, and it's working. Because when media sources like Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos and he's leveraging it as his talking mouthpiece, what I can say is, sir, you need to realize that the mountain of which you stand on was created in a place that was off the backs of our men and women that you're literally taking food and money and opportunity and access away from. And every year, the V8 comes out with new guidelines on what is or is not rateable. And this is where the military and we as leaders have to communicate. Why does a person who's never served gets to determine how somebody has to communicate when they communicate, or what it is that they get after that said communication? If we don't have genuine leaders, like I said, get out of the way. All right.
Right.
Because we're stepping in. ADAX Entertainment is leading the way. The Devil Doc Talk Show is leading the way. Chris, man, I know you're leading the way, right? I am so jazzed to have you on today. Before we wrap up, do you have any last shout outs, any words or anything you wanted to follow up with before we wrap?
Well, we've been talking about a lot of things. Reach out to your local resources. NAMI is a great resource. AFSP is a great resource, and they have resources near you. So Google's your friend. Go ahead and Google resources near you. It'll pop up, a few places, but reach out to them. Do the grunt work, do the walks, do any kind of outreach that you can do. Those things matter. They may not seem like they matter when you go to them. You're not going to see tens of thousands of people. You're going to see maybe a few hundred people. Get out there and do the work. Get the message out there about 988, that we're not spending the money to do the marketing, so let's do the marketing ourselves. Get the word out about 988. We have veterans all over the world. Find other countries are using 3-digit codes. Find out the 3-digit code or whatever resource in your area. I hate to say it, but it's true. A lot of countries are they're further ahead in suicide prevention than we are. So use the resources near you if you have it, but don't, and I say this all the time also, don't suffer in silence. And also don't be fearful of what you say is going to scare the person you're telling. Because when you call 988 and you tell them your story, they've heard it all. Just tell them the truth, get the word out, get you the resources you need. We do not want you to die by suicide. One last thing about legislators: if you're Democrat or Republican and you want more voters, save people from dying by suicide. It affects everybody, Democrat, Republican. Absolutely. If you want more Democrat voters, save them from suicide and they'll vote for you later. If you're Republican, save them from suicide and you'll have more voters in the future. It matters to everybody. If you think about it, we're all connected. Let's do something, but let's start now.